Yeah.
So we'll get going. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. The topic is critical requirements to position India as the vaccine and medical manufacturing capital of the world. This event is organized by FABA and FABA Academy in collaboration with RX Propellant and GV Connect. I'm Dr. Neti Tulpule, Vice President, International Business Development and Strategy at RX Propellant, and I'm honored to be the moderator for this session. I would now request Dr. Neti of FABA to give a brief introduction to her organization, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neti. And now may I please, to start with, I welcome you all to this another webinar from FABA in collaboration with RX Propellant. Just to introduce a little bit about FABA, everybody. Federation of Asian Biotech Associations has been providing a platform for the academy, industry, and government agencies to come together and interact through various activities such as distinguished lectures, seminars, workshops, and conferences for the past 17 years. Well, BioAsia, which we know is conducted every year in Hyderabad, has been the flagship event of FABA for all these years. And in 2020, FABA went on to launch FABA Academy with a mission to address the issue of lack of trained manpower in the pharma and biotech industry. We focus on reskilling and upskilling of the interested candidates, and so that they become future ready. We do so by conducting various workshops which are focused on teaching you about industry or job relevant topics, such as workshop on biologics and biosimilars, workshop on drug discovery and development, chromatography workshop on data science, biosecurity and biosafety, among many others industry relevant topics. These workshops prepare you with the skill sets that are required by the industry. And so till now, we have catered to more than 5,000 life sciences enthusiasts, which include not only the undergrads or postgrads, but also PhDs, postdoc, faculties, and early career professionals. Well, in terms of our services, we also provide these career opportunities-oriented webinars almost every month. Till now, since our launch in 2020, we have conducted over 35 webinars, and such activities keep on happening every month. I would request you all to go through the link that will be put in the chat box so that you can visit all our social media platforms and follow our website for the regular updates from us. In our upcoming workshop, we have immunoassay workshop in collaboration with Merck and biosecurity and biosafety workshop in association with HSP Partners USA. So the dates of these workshops will all be uploaded. The information will all be given to you through our social media platforms. So definitely follow us there. And if you are already associated with us, do not forget to check out your emails as well. So with this, Ketki, I hand her back to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Neti. So I'll take a few minutes now to introduce RX Propellant and our initiative GV Connect. RX Propellant is a life science infrastructure platform that encompasses real estate, scientific networking, and talent nurturing. Our vision is to establish world-class clusters in India. Currently, we have a footprint in Hyderabad, Bangalore, and upcoming footprint in Navi Mumbai and Ahmedabad. Now, GV Connect is our initiative, which is basically to bring the scientific community together. We currently operate in Genome Valley, Hyderabad, which obviously has the presence of about 200 companies in this cluster. And what we try to do through GV Connect is to bring the scientific community together in academia as well as industry to have sessions which are scientific to talk about how to enhance the cluster of Genome Valley and also to foster collaboration and exchange ideas. With that, I will switch gears a bit and will move on to introduce our speaker and panelists. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. I'll start by introducing Dr. Rajan Sriraman. He is head R&D for vaccines at Reliance Life Sciences. He's done his master's from MS University Baroda and PhD from TERI in Delhi. He's done his postdoctoral training from the Technical University of Aachen in Germany and has been working in vaccines R&D for the past 16 years. He's been a part of the team that developed the world's first typhoid CRM-197 conjugate vaccine, and he's also played a pivotal role in the development of pneumococcal conjugate vaccines, as well as vaccines for hepatitis A and measles. He's authored 24 peer-reviewed papers in international journals and has filed over 14 patents till date. Additionally, he has also authored 2 book chapters. Moving on, we have Mr. Lakshminarayana Neti. He is the Chief Operating Officer at Biological E. He has over 30 years of experience in helping build successful businesses, scaling organizations with focus on culture, processes, talent, brands, partnerships, and advocacy. He has served across multiple sectors, including healthcare services, pharmaceuticals and vaccines, consumer goods, and diagnostics. He's worked with leading companies such as Abbott, Dr. Reddy's, and his current association with Biological E. Mr. Neti has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and MBA in finance from Manchester Business School and a postgraduate diploma in patent law. Next, we have Dr. Nalam Rao. He is the Chief Executive Officer of AIC CCMB. He's completed his master's from Punjab Agricultural University in Ludhiana and his PhD in biochemistry from Osmania University, Hyderabad. Dr. Rao has a scientific career spanning over 35 years with diverse expertise in protein engineering, protein biophysics, in vitro protein evolution, and chimeric proteins for drug delivery. Thus far, he's authored 2 books, 108 research publications, and 16 patents. As the head of AIC CCMB, Dr. Rao is passionate about establishing an ecosystem of stakeholders from industry, investors, IP, and regulators for seamless technology transfer. Please note that during the course of this webinar, if you have any questions, use the chat box to share those questions with us. Towards the end of this session, we will have a Q&A session where we will address your questions. I'll now invite Dr. Rajan to present his talk. Dr. Rajan, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Ketki.
But my kitchen I was not able to enter. But someone is seeing.
Are you able to see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Right. Thank you, FABA, and thank you, Professor Rajan and Dr. Sharma, for giving this opportunity. My apologies for a little delay because there was some issue in getting the link. Even after repeated trial, it was not going through, so I had to manage somehow. But I'm here. So the topic is quite broad and one that actually requires a far more a senior person with maybe years of experience to figure out what are the critical roles that India has to do, play, requirements that India has to have so that it becomes a medical manufacturing capital of the world. Now, while the topic is assigned, so when I was going through, I find a lot of this is already existing. So I'll just try to do overview of what is already existing. And the other thing is, whenever somebody wants to see and probe an issue, they'll always find some gaps. So there will be some gap analysis as well. So we'll see where we go from there. So this is the framework. The opinion expressed in this presentation are personal. It doesn't belong to my organization where I serve. It is the majority of the talk would be focused around vaccines, although it says also medical technologies. And unless specified, all the images are taken from Google Images. So the content of my talk is basically on four topics: the vaccine manufacturing, where India is, what are the gaps as leading manufacturer, and what would it take to achieve a leadership position in vaccines, and finally a conclusion take-home message. So let's get going with where we are with respect to vaccines. So we are already, India is a powerhouse as far as vaccine is concerned, and it's received accolades from various renowned figures and personalities around the world. And the latest one being COVID, where UN Secretary General actually said that India's vaccine capability is one of the best assets the world has. And when we completed 1 billion vaccine dose in 278 days, that basically required 3.5 million dose administration per year, that proved the prowess of who we are in not just producing, but also delivering vaccine to people. Bill Gates applauds the Indian manufacturers, and so does we got a standing ovation for our policies in Davos. Now, this is no normal feat that in addition to Covishield and Covaxin that was already there for coronavirus, in a very short span, India added additional capability of 1.26 billion doses on just COVID alone. So as we already make, as far as manufacturing is concerned, we are a powerhouse and we lead the table. Yet, let's see what else we can do. So we have about 22 vaccine manufacturing company, of which 15 are in private sectors and 7 public sector companies. And if you look at the product basket and also the capacity, installed capacity of these vaccines, they are astounding. Some of the vaccines like tetanus, DPT, measles, we actually supply to the whole world. BCG, and what also you notice is this product basket is a mix of almost everything that is known as vaccine. So you have inactivated bacteria, you have toxin, you have inactivated viruses, live attenuated viruses, you have conjugates, and you have recombinant proteins. And with COVID, we have also included nucleic acid-based vaccines into our portfolio as a country. Now, the estimates that you see are from National Bureau of Central Bureau of Health Intelligence, and the figures is 2019. But for the last three, that is HPV and PCV and COVID, these three were recent launches, and its capacity is based on media reports. So as you can see, we have a very broad spectrum of product basket, very huge capacity, installed capacity, and yet in the enabling environment, we already have a very well-defined regulatory framework, which also encourages pre-submission consultation. And we have trained engineering support that runs our facility, not just facility, but also equipment, very good cold chain logistics. And we are probably the only country that uses sophisticated vaccine track and trace technology. Probably Japan and Singapore are ahead of us, but we are far better than US. Productivity linked incentive, which is also now being extended to vaccine manufacturing, is a very lucrative scheme for people to invest in vaccine. We have a BioNest setup, which promotes a lot of startup company, and there is increase in health spending already since this government has taken up Mission Indradhanush to vaccinate almost every child. So in terms of ecosystem, we already have a thriving ecosystem, and from here we can only go and be the top of the world. So as a manufacturer, where are the gaps in what we are doing currently? So if you look at the vaccine market, it's about $61 billion. and which will grow to almost double with a 10.8% annual growth. And if you look at the kind of products that will occupy, that are occupying currently in the market share, these are all revenue shares. A large portion of that is recombinant and conjugate subunit vaccine. And my guess, and you can read it very in between the line, this is driven by pneumococcal and human papillomavirus, which is a recombinant vaccine. That drives the major bulk of revenue in market. You have next is inactivated and live attenuated vaccine, and the very small portion is toxoid. Now, the reason for putting this is if you look at the product mix that I just showed, a lot of this is inactivated vaccine and toxoid vaccine. We have a very, very few installed capability in conjugate and recombinant vaccine. So that's where we need to actually be thriving, going ahead. And although there are companies that have already installed, launched conjugate vaccines, which is required for this country. Now, introducing any new vaccine requires a rigorous and continuous R&D effort, and that will remain a challenge, not just for India, but everywhere else, because it's dictated by a multitude of factors that are involved. Now, this is where the problem is highlighted. So on the left-hand side, you have the share in terms of volume that we export to the world in global exports. India in this document is pegged at 24.65%, although the Neti document says it's 62% of the global vaccine. That number is not the issue that we are debating here. Look at the revenue that we generate out of a very large chunk that we export. So all our vaccines are and toxoid and toxin inactivated vaccines made for a very, very low cost and sold at in a market that is not does not have a huge purchasing capacity. So therefore, we lag behind in terms of revenue generation, but we are quite there as far as vaccine manufacturing is concerned. So, and a similar situation, you can see what happened in COVID, and this is a WTO vaccine tracker data, that we had only 2% revenue when compared to China, which had 32%, and European Union had 39% of the revenue share in the COVID vaccine export. So although we make a lot of vaccine, but we do not make a lot of money. Now, why is that? The R&D spend in India in overall is 0.7%, and this is an overall R&D spend, of which a large chunk admittedly goes into health. But still, compared to any other countries like Germany, US, China, and Japan, the spending is way, way below the ranks that are the numbers that are spent in US. And this needs to go up at least threefold. And why is that? Because biopharma industry is extremely heavily regulated industry in R&D, in manufacturing, marketing, and to some extent in pricing. There are vaccines and products for which we cannot even dictate the price, it's already fixed. And this high regulation requires basically a lot of investment to be made in assessing, making sure the product is of good quality and meets consistency. When the pricing of certain vaccine is fixed by government, obviously it is fixed at a lower end. So one has to install off a very, very high capacity to be able to meet the break-even scenario. Now, also the higher R&D fixed cost pushes the investment level up. So what is the way around? So the only way around is to have patent, which is you do not have to pay licensing fee, etc., and recover the R&D costs by setting a higher, substantially higher than the marginal cost to recover your investment, and that builds a kind of an incentive to go ahead. Now, what would it take to achieving the leadership role? And I do not want to steal words from people like who are my seniors. Mr. Neti is already there. He knows much better than what I'm going to say, but this is the market 101 in the leadership. If you have to be leadership in a leadership role, you must have the highest share of the market. That is one. Or you must be the first mover so that you can actually dictate the pricing terms. So you must be quick in developing and bringing the product to the market. So it should not, the product should not be the perfect one to hit. Even if there are flaws, take it out, because there will be opportunity to correct it over a period of time. Time to differentiate for us now from being just a low-cost manufacturer to first in class. That's because a lot of other companies whose countries whose population is getting educated, they have living standards improve, their incomes goes up, they would soon learn that this is a big opportunity, and they will start also to manufacture vaccines at much lower cost, and they will start losing edge. So we need to innovate sooner or later than later. And innovation will actually help in us being able to dictate the market, both in terms of pricing as well as by securing the patent. Now, India has always been a vaccine leader. Now, why it is very encouraging and why we are so hopeful that we'll not lag behind is, look at the market in IT sector that it has evolved from being a BPO to IT enabled service. Now there's a large number of startup that is coming up. The moment you have startup in an economy, and India, by the way, is the third largest startup ecosystem, then the manufacturing will dictate innovations automatically. People will be driving for lowering the cost, or looking for ways to innovate and new technology, etc. So having a big startup ecosystem is a very, very good thing that we already have. And I truly believe we as a nation, whenever we focused onto something, we already achieved. And COVID is no exception. We really achieved what many thought would be impossible. Now, the innovative mindset, the innovation mindset basically is, we are used to being a manufacturer of an existing vaccine. Now, why that is easier? Because you have specifications and the processes are all well defined. The regulators also find it easier to go through those documents and approve. However, when you develop a new vaccine from scratch, from identifying a disease-causing organism to finding out what could be the vaccine target and how you would develop that into a product, would require a very, very serious R&D effort. And that's where we need to be, because if we have to be the first mover, we need to be innovating and finding out new vaccines way ahead, way before anybody else thought of. So, and also, wherever there is need analysis, we need to, in case of vaccines, it will depend on etiology, it will depend disease etiology, epidemiology, and molecular mechanism. And all of this is not an industry domain. This is a domain where the universities and education system need to step up and see how they can support and generate enough data that is required to convert the leads into product. And we need to also develop a very deep sense of scientific understanding into the product that we actually develop and commercialize. Now, the critical requirement is also to become a vaccine leader, to have the scientific data captured and archival. And I can tell you without naming the institutions or organizations, when as a new entrant in vaccines industry, when we go around, look for technology, we did go to a couple of places within India. And although the technology is promising, it can work, but we have to drop simply because there is not enough data to support regulatory scrutiny. So we do work, we have data which is captured, but it is not available in a form or not available at all that can withstand. So that we need to invest a great deal in how we capture and archive our data, so that even if somebody is gone or retired or left the organization, it's available for anyone else to use, because it's a lot of effort and money that is spent. And the quality is also very important, and not just of manufacturing, higher quality in services. The manufacturing, vaccine manufacturing requires services from other places, like you have clinical services, you have preclinical services, you have characterization services, and they also need to be maintaining a sufficiently high standard quality. And one of the important criteria to become a technology platform leader, the vaccine manufacturing leader, is to create your own technology platform. Just like Moderna or Pfizer BioNTech, they had a technology platform. In fact, they have several other vaccines that are already under a clinical trial. So a platform technology basically helps you switch between different disease-causing agents and then move ahead and reach the market faster. Manufacturing system is, when I say manufacturing system, reactors is what I mean. We are used to certain traditional way of growing cells and making the vaccines. And sometimes they themselves are a big impediment because they do not help you drive down the cost. So there are mechanisms, there are methods, there are reactors already available. We should be open to evaluate those. And this is the least paid attention to formulation of a vaccine. We forget that actually what gets tested in human or in clinic is the formulation and not anything else. We need to be paying a lot of attention in what formulation we develop, because the ingredients that are going into formulation invariably are imported. We can also do away with it. We do not have to necessarily follow exactly the same method. And this is particularly true when we are developing something absolutely new. We are the drivers, and we should be able to do our own formulation. And component manufacturing. A vaccine is not just one antigen. It has several other components, including as simple as a vial in which it is filled, or a bung that is used to stop it, and from where injection will be piercing in. All these things need to be extremely of high standard quality. When we were trying to ramp up, there was a media report, people would be aware that we were struggling to get even the components because there was an export ban in the United States. There were glasses and vials that were not available to fill. Although we were able to make the vaccine, we were not able to fill them into vials. So we need to have, and these are not something which is extremely technical. These are something that is doable, basic engineering and metallurgy kind of a work. We should have an ancillary industry supporting all the components that can be made within this country. And finally, last but not the least, as they say, collaboration is extremely, extremely important because product development is a multidisciplinary approach. Collaboration is required not just within the institution, but also we need to collaborate with government. And again, COVID is an exemplary example where the governments did collaborate in a very, very significant way to help develop the vaccine. So there will be ever-changing pathogen landscape. There will be skill sets which the industry simply does not have. And also the regulatory frameworks keep changing, and for which we need to be collaborating, which is already happening, but it has to happen even more in future. Now, when I said manufacturing process and especially the reactor system, there are two reactor systems which are listed out here, and this is for viral vaccine manufacturing. So you have a fermenter and you have an incubator system in which you either keep a roller bottle or a cell stack, which is used for adherent cell, and the suspension cell is grown in reactor system. And both of these occupy extremely large area. And having a large area means you have a lot of utility consumption. It takes a lot of revenue to create and produce a vaccine. We tend to forget that most of the mammalian cells that are used in vaccine manufacturing were adapted to suspension culture. They were not suspension culture before. So there are technologies available which allow adherent cells to be growing in extremely low footprint. And that helps you minimize the facility cost. A lower facility footprint basically reduces the operation cost, not just of the media, but also all the utilities that are required to maintain the vaccine in a vaccine environment, in a classified air. And automation, the smaller equipments are basically automated, and smaller, when we use smaller equipment, the automation helps make safer operation to the operator, and also it helps achieve a higher compliance. And that's what we should be driving at. We should achieve higher and higher compliance. Now, when we speak of platform technology, the recombinant protein is anyway a platform technology where we should be developing our own vectors, which is proprietary, and wherein we can simply plug the gene of interest and start working with the protein. Virus-like particle is a very lucrative approach for displaying the epitope, or as virus-like particle for viruses themselves. Nucleic acid-based approaches are also there, both DNA as well as RNA. And delivery system, as I mentioned, the formulation is extremely important that we need to be taking care of. And so far, all the vaccines that we've been developing and we've been commercializing within the country are all prophylactic vaccine. That means they are vaccines that are given to prevent an onset of a disease. Time has come that we move away from just making a prophylactic vaccine, but also discover and commercialize therapeutic vaccine for chronic infection. How nice it would be to be able to cure a tuberculosis, a person who's infected, which is already with tuberculosis. There are already certain vaccines that are being commercialized and for infection as well as cancer. But I think we need to step in here, and there are opportunities to find out ways to create therapeutic vaccines for various disease indications. And when I say component, I did mention we require a lot of material that goes into making a vaccine, like vial, a syringe, including adjuvants, which is used for formulation. Why that is important is because we supply chain bottleneck is one aspect. We free ourselves from inflationary pressure. We can create a competitive pricing if we have end-to-end manufacturing in our control. And also, it helps innovation in much better way. If you know how to make a certain kind of a syringe, you can always think of making another kind of a syringe because you know how to make it. So an ecosystem is created when you actually have entire manufacturing workflow under your control. Now, Finally, I would just also say that formulation, as I said, almost every vaccine uses adjuvant, and it depends only on few ingredients that are produced. Only one or two manufacturers in the world produces the ingredients that are present in the vaccine. And to our surprise, there are a lot of immune modulators that are plant-based, which is, we are not a country that does not have plants within our geographical terrain. Most of the plants are also well studied, and some of them are also known to have a very, very potential adjuvanting effect. So all in all, there needs to be a very, very targeted effort to create adjuvant system. And finally, the vaccine trials, clinical trials, and this is our own experience. The end analysis is basically a serological analysis. The CROs that are operating do not have sufficient capability to develop, standardize in a quick fashion, and any assay method that would withstand regulatory scrutiny. So we need to step in, that there's an opportunity to develop capability to rapidly standardize vaccine evaluation method. Now, what would be the take-home message? We need to be, from just being a manufacturer, we should be now an innovation-driven manufacturer. We have to have newer technology platform, and we must be self-sufficient in not just vaccine manufacturing, but also vaccine component manufacturing. And there must be GLP assay methods, that is good laboratory practice assay methods for developing, evaluating the vaccine. And we must collaborate with stakeholders, not just with academia, but also with the government. And it's already happening, but it should continue, and with much more rigor. We must realize that health is a security, and we must be spending to create stockpile, just as we create stockpile of weapons. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rajan, for that rather insightful talk. I think the topic was very vast, and you touched upon a lot of different elements to position India as a leader in vaccine manufacturing. I will now request Mr. Neti and Dr. Rao to please join the panel discussion on this topic. And in the interest of time, since we know that Mr. Neti has a hard stop at 6 p.m., why don't I start with you, sir? One of the things that Dr. Rajan talked about is the importance of collaboration. In your experience, how important is it to forge these external partnerships, not only for research, but also for manufacturing?
Sir, you're on mute. Can you please? Yeah.
Am I audible now?
Yes, yes. Okay.
So it's a good question. I mean, it's a wonderful presentation, Dr. Sriraman. The key question that you're asking is about whether partnerships are relevant, useful. I think for vaccine manufacturing, historically, at least to the extent that I know, largely it's dependent on few companies, and they have been very vertically integrated back to back, and then they've been in the business for decades or whatever. As we go forward, but I'm fairly sure as the industry matures, the partnerships is essential. But as we speak as well, say, for example, the COVID vaccine that we brought as a subunit protein vaccine, we partnered with Baylor College of Medicine of Texas, and then where they created the engineered strain, and then we scaled it up and then made the formulation and then taken it to the world with pre-qualification. Similarly, we partnered with Novartis to bring in the conjugate vaccine of the typhoid. So there are partnerships, but these partnerships operate at different levels, and this, in my view, is largely dependent on the industry industry and its maturity. Pharmaceuticals have significantly benefited from these partnerships because it has really become big, and then it has become extremely competitive. So in the vaccine world, I think it is maturing, and then there is lots of partnerships now at different levels. One with reference to the partnerships with academia and then universities, so that you are harnessing the intellectual capital of the universities. Similarly, the partnerships from the research universities. But then I think the vaccine industry largely historically has done pretty well is about bringing in, because vaccination is more of a lifestyle and then a social habit itself. And in that sense, I think the various constituent members from NGOs and philanthropic organizations such as Gates Foundation, Wellcome Trust, and similarly the UNICEF and many other, I mean, the Gavi Alliance, and then the manufacturers themselves. I think they did a wonderful job. And I think if today we have reasonably got rid of the concern of the COVID vaccine, at least, I mean, COVID pandemic, and we are able to start getting back to normalcy, I think it's wonderful work that these people have done. So answering your question straight is about partnerships is significantly very valuable. But historically, this industry hasn't been very enabling that. But going forward, as industry matures, it will.
Right. Thank you so much for that, sir. I would have another question for you. This is regarding manufacturing, which was also touched upon in the presentation. Mm-hmm. So we know that Biological E expanded their manufacturing capacity for Corbevax. But we would put COVID-19 behind us, hopefully soon. So how do we leverage these capacities?
It's a question if I wish I knew the answer for this. But anyway, we have been in the vaccine business for more than 7 decades. And then even before the pandemic, we were in the vaccines. And I'm fairly sure for many decades now, we have great contributions to make. And to that extent, in the medium term, yes, we have increased our capacity significantly. And that is going to really add some challenges in the medium term. But I think we have some of the impressive pipeline of vaccines, which we have an incumbent responsibility to serve the world. And like the way that we at BE and also other friendly companies in India, we always set up for world scale facilities. So we have significant opportunities to fill our capacities in the medium term, but obviously on an immediate short term, yes. But having said that, it's a pandemic that it really kept us on toes. Last year around this time, we were running around the wave 2, and then people were running for cover. Both, I mean, all sections of the society, that includes government, society, and individuals like us. And then as we go along, we only wish that it doesn't recur in any menacing fashion. But then, I mean, as we speak, I'm also at UNICEF right now. And then there is also talk that this the boosting of your immunity antibodies will essentially have to be done potentially annually, is what some parts of the thinking is still going up. Obviously, it's still up for debate. So it's these capacities, yes, in the immediate term, we will have some flexibility. But in the medium term, I don't think we will have too much of a problem.
All right. Thank you so much for that. And a final question for you.
Okay.
This is regarding the importance of a cluster. So we know that Biological E today is in Genome Valley. What
Correct.
do you see are the key benefits of being in a cluster like Genome Valley?
Significant many. I must mention, say, for example, till recently, attracting a great talent from the biotech industry, all said and done, the leadership positions, we all try and hire from above the country, at least until very recently. But then over a period of this cluster, our ability to attract some of the best talent of our own Indian diaspora, wherever they are in the leadership companies, and that has significantly improved, one. Secondly, as I mentioned, in terms of the industry and its nature itself is set to change. As we speak here, say, for example, we supply currently, the Indian vaccine industry supplies close to 67% of the vaccine by volume to the global needs. About each of our companies supply about 130, 140 different countries. So that's the level of dominant position that we have. But then there are also some concerns which do come up. Like, I pick up from where Dr. Rajan Sriraman mentioned, like the way that the software industry has done and how they really became dominant in the world. I think we also will have to learn from the current trends. As we speak, say, for example, in the times that we were really running for cover when the wave 2 struck us with Delta variant, and then that's the time that we have stopped all the vaccine exports and all, but that has also attracted some amount of disrepute from countries in Africa and many other developing countries. And that's where there is a movement around saying that they require a regional manufacturing. So in that sense, say, for example, some of the models that our other industry peers may have done in software or whatever, we may also need to globalize our footprint, so that you continue to have the dominance, obviously, and then how do you redistribute what the concerns various corners of the world will have. So that's one piece. And given this, and then as you specifically asked about our clusters, there is a lot of opportunity. The industry historically, as I mentioned, is an extremely vertically integrated industry. But then as we go forward, it will essentially have to get very specialized. Niche boutique development firms will essentially have to happen, and that's exactly something GV Connect and your organizations are doing in terms of bringing the asset-light models for the entrepreneurs to start doing great work at smaller pieces, so that they can engage with, because there is space for everybody to play in different parts of the value chain, and I think that's really helping. As you mentioned, there are lots of local boutique service offerances that we get in a cluster like Genome Valley is one of a kind, and I'm not surprised that you are expanding to other towns and cities which are strong on life science practice.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Neti. I'll now move on to Dr. Rao. I would have a couple of questions for you as well. So one of the things that Dr. Rajan touched upon is the role of startups in really positioning India on a global scale. You bring in that unique perspective from AIC CCMB. So I would like you to maybe share some thoughts on how you use the pandemic to really foster new ideas with your accelerator program for COVID-19 technology deployment.
Yeah, thank you, FABA. Obviously, during the pandemic, the pressure was more on diagnostics, testing and all that. So that's one part. And screening of molecules, but that's a long-term option. Both the things have come to CCMB, AIC CCMB were more because we were having a BSL-3 facility to culture the virus. And also we have a large collection of samples, COVID samples with us for testing any new kit that comes to us, validated, not necessarily RT-PCR based, but there are several kits that came which are electrical measurement based, or lateral flow devices, rapid antigen kits and all that. So several of them came to us, and the rush was pretty high. And this gave us, since we have access to these things, we were able to support a lot of these things. But at the same time, the opportunity to quickly put it in the market is always been slow. Though a kit is validated by us and then it looks good, but at the same time, you need to a lot of hard hoops that you have to go through in terms of getting approvals, GMP facilities, 3 batches submissions, waiting for the results. All those things should have been faster so that more things could have been in the market. And here, most of the time we dealt with startups. The startups have been very, very aggressive, obviously, because there is a business opportunity in this thing. So it was kind of it was a interesting opportunity for us also to learn from such a rapid thing. And also another thing we have done was at least in the end of 2020, there was the shortage of a lot of these RT-PCR kits. But in Hyderabad itself, there are a lot of manufacturers of RT-PCR components, but they are not interested in kit manufacturing. Okay, so we were trying, but at the same time, there's always a question of quality. Everybody says they've got good stuff, but we ran a program wherein we collected some 20 companies, components, benchmarked them with the best, and then looked at their capacity and gave a report on what can I make something like 30 million kits per month. Do I have the capacity? Actually, when we did a very close analysis, we realized that it is quite possible. So these are all interesting lessons we learned in the COVID time, especially coming from startups. I think it's a nice experience. Yes.
Right. Thank you for that. And I have another question for you. This is more related to technology. So quite often we see a lot of innovative ideas being nurtured in academia, but they do have a challenge when seeing any commercial success, because there is this gap between academia and industry. So in your opinion, what can be done to bridge this gap?
I think this is, I think Rajan is around and all of us struggle to make this happen. And I tell you, the problem is on both sides. There is intent, definitely. Like, for example, I was a scientist for a long time. And we get help, say, for example, while doing my research, I get help in purchasing the equipment or management of the projects and things like that. And I don't get the same kind of help if I want to tech transfer. I mean, there's no division. There is no active division that really understands both sides of the story. Any academic institute, there may be a kind of a business development groups in all of them, but they were not really run by professionals in that domain. So what happens is there is a kind of not a very active groups that don't let this happen. And also you don't expect scientists to be understand the difficult challenges of a business. So it is best to take the idea and somebody else should mature it, like what happens in the West by TTOs. That has to happen. And also second thing is Indian industry also is kind of, at least still recently, was looking for more safer, proven kind of things elsewhere. And the risk taking is far less. They nowadays, if you see, nowadays I can imagine some of these, like recent example of IIT Mumbai, where the company put a lot of money to buy some of the CAR T-cell therapy technology like that. It's such a nice thing to hear about, and also a couple of stories in Bangalore. So now corporates are willing to put money to take an early stage technologies and grow along with them, which was not there a few years ago. So I think there is a clear, like what Rajan also mentioned, there has to be a stakeholders engagement from both sides and also appreciation. And in fact, there should be more and more engagements or mixers of this kind to happen so that, some of these kind of apprehensions can be resolved, which is the necessity of the day, because it's essential and it's the way to go about, as Rajan was mentioning, the innovations have to come from academic institutes mostly. And it's easy from there if an industry is interested.
Right, thank you. And then a final question to you, this regarding patents and IP, because that's usually also an area which is unexplored for a typical bench scientist. So how can incubators help in this entire process, especially in the Indian context?
I think now, I think there are a lot of incentives both from state and center and also some of the incubators, private incubators, to support these patent things. Because for startup to grow and become a good business, patenting is essential. There is no second thoughts about it. Unless they own a patent on whatever they are promoting, no investor would be interested, because why should somebody invest in something, grow it, and then lose the control over it? So patent freedom is very, very important to operate. for a startup. And today, if they're interested, there are many ways, many support systems do exist. And we do help our startups in this particular game to bring them a lot of IP. I mean, basically to look at whether if there is a novelty in it, or are they imagining a novelty. There are a lot of the handholding is required for them to appreciate the need. Because patents are such that, first you try to get a state Indian patent, then you go abroad if you think there is a broader footprint that is available. So it is crucial. And I think all the incubators try to help them. IKP Prime is one of the things that came up and then did a lot of work in that context. I think, it's a kind of foregone conclusion that is essential.
Right. Thank you so much for that. So now we'll move on to Dr. Rajan. A question for you, which is again going back to the point that you brought up on innovation. An enabling ecosystem, like we've already discussed, is very key for innovation. And you've spent quite a few years abroad. So when you look at the ecosystems, especially the life science ecosystems that exist outside India versus what happens in India right now, how do you think India fares, and what are those avenues for improvement for us?
Yeah. I don't see any major difference except for the fact that most of the universities are well funded. So once that funding is there, I know a dozen of names which is very much present within this country. They have innovative idea. It could not mature because they just ran out of funds. And as industry, we could not even go forward because it's not worth taking a risk with a half-baked idea or half-baked technology. So if funding on a research platform is extremely important. And I did, for a very specific reason, I did put that one last sentence in my talk. We spend a lot in maintaining nuclear arsenal. Mind you, every nuclear arsenal has an expiry date. So does a drug. And we have to make a decision. There is one credible deterrence, one thing that we maintain to safeguard security of the border, but people's health is also a security issue. So I think going forward, I do hope that there will be much more funds available to universities where they will be a little more free to decide. A lot of people who are on this panel who have worked abroad, they know that when they have to order an equipment, sometimes it's so much more easier to order those equipment. And therefore, the time taken to get the resource before you translate your idea into reality is so much more faster. You feel enthused, you feel valued. Here, if you ask for an equipment, if there are 20 different procedures to be followed, then people lose interest. I think there's more than people, it is more of the procedure, more of the ecosystem, and more of the availability of fund. Otherwise, I don't see why our people who are anyway doing good anywhere else will not be able to deliver the same result here.
Absolutely, Dr. Rajan, thanks for that. Another question I have for you is a little different from the first one. So there are a lot of central testing laboratories that have been established for testing vaccines as well as medical devices. In your opinion, the capacity that we have today, is that sufficient, or is there a room to also scale up such testing facilities?
I can definitely, for the COVID, you mean, or what?
In general, for vaccines.
Okay, so the capacity in drug testing, that was supposed to be expanding, and Pune and Hyderabad were chosen site for an expansion because for obvious reason, Hyderabad and Pune have two large areas where vaccines are being manufactured. For some reason, I'm not a government person to be able to tell you why they have not taken off. There are procedural issues probably, but I think it will debottleneck if those facilities are commissioned and they start accepting the sample. Currently, they do not accept samples for analysis, and it will definitely be worthwhile investing there.
Right. Thank you so much for that. And the last question would be regarding the importance of contract manufacturing organizations. So the role of CMOs in generics is very well established. How do you think we can increase our capacity on the contract manufacturing for vaccines particularly?
How do we increase? Obviously, it boils down to the funds, but I do see a lot of opportunity where there is if there is an entrepreneur who wants to set up a contract manufacturing facility. Because what happens is, if as an industry, let's say we are running a portfolio of product which is in production, and then there is a couple of others that are in our pipeline. Having a contract manufacturer always helps to get clinical material or preclinical material being manufactured so that the capacity within the industry is free to do something else. So it is an integral and a very important component. And the contract manufacturer should not just aim for Indian thing. You know, Syngene is a contract manufacturing arm of Biocon, and they do pretty well. They take contract from everywhere else in the world because they have established a good quality system. So a contract manufacturing with good quality system is a need, and it will definitely benefit the industry.
Right. Thank you so much for that. Now we will open the floor for discussion. So if anyone has any particular questions they would want the panelists to address, please feel free to share them here in the chat box. So there are a lot of comments coming in. There is one question that we got on which is very relevant, Dr. Rajan, to your aspect on how we have to import equipment, which, you know, obviously has a lead time associated with it. So the question here says, how much, so when it comes to reagents and consumables today in a lab, how big a portion of that is from domestic production, and how much do we still rely on organizations outside India to import these reagents and kits?
Fortunately, to a large extent, the basic equipment are very well manufactured in a manufacturing scale, is manufactured and sourced from within the country. And that's also done because we have to keep our costs low. So we do get reasonably good equipment and support at a manufacturing scale. But when it comes to R&D scale equipment, the same manufacturers does not supply R&D equipment, although they are okay to supply a manufacturing scale equipment. So there is definitely a need, and which will require, I do not know what kind of investment and which kind of areas, but a simple thing like India produces a lot of polymers. We export tons of polymers around the world. Plasticware is something that we import. That's the start, and we can actually make plasticware. It's not just molding something. The quality of the plasticware needs to be good. We need to focus on quality, and we need to focus on compliance, because even the plasticware, which is going for manufacturing, has certain regulation. If we follow that, I'm pretty sure if we focus, we will achieve. I know that. But it's just that need to be sensitive about what needs to be done. We do have provisions and to create these kind of infrastructure, but we claim that we have very big software base, for trained software professional base. We still don't write our programs. So these are hard realities. We need to focus on to getting something which is fundamental, which is our own.
Absolutely. So thanks for that. There's another question that's come in, and I would request Dr. Rao to perhaps address this. So it says the funding should not be dependent only on government agencies, but should be aimed, you should also aim at getting funding from private players. Any thoughts that you have around this statement, sir? You're on mute, sir.
Yes, I agree. That's, I think, probably part of the question that you asked about the participation of corporates and then, the industry, academia interactions and things like that. Yeah, we should depend on that. But, see, the corporates are businesses. So unless you align yourself and see their objectives and vision in your own scheme of things, otherwise, in the scheme of things of a researcher, it's not going to work because they put in money for a specific purpose, and you should be in line with that. And so, if that kind of understanding is, this is where occasionally some of the success stories come, because the scientists understand very clearly the money aspects of the company, why are they putting it, and things like that. So if that understanding exists, it goes. So it's very important. There is no second thoughts about it.
Right. And there's another question, if I could just send it your way. The question is, how much is the regulatory body geared up to clear innovative vaccines or drugs today?
See, if it is an innovative one, obviously it is new to everybody. So one has to look at the technology, the kind of things that go into it, the formulations, the route of administration, and the data that backs it up. Because vaccine industry is a very long-term, it's been there for a long time. And new things that come up can always be mapped with the prior experience with the other kind of vaccines. Like, for example, mRNA vaccines. They are new, but at the same time, we have so much of experience at the regulatory level, what kind of data to be expected to make them approved. And also sometimes many of these vaccines have come from West, for example. So they always come with certain amount of data and safety issues and efficacy issues. I think we can always take them in our consideration while setting up our own regulatory framework for a new innovative vaccine. It's not a huge challenge, but it can happen, because it's, in the end, you keep your higher standard on the safety part of it, because that's what drives anything that goes into the market. Efficacy comes later. So safety first. So keeping that kind of an ideals, I think we can adopt, because academically, I think India is pretty strong in terms both at a corporate and academic level. So it's not difficult to frame rules. So it should not be a difficult thing for regulatory to come up with.
Right. Dr. Rajan, any thoughts on this?
Yes, it's a very valid question. And I think Dr. Rao also summarized it well. I just wanted to share personal experience. I'm seeing off late, when I interact with government officials, they're very, very receptive, very forthcoming, and you can reason them. If there is something new, we have been able to get some approval for extremely new methods, which was not there in pharmacopoeia. But see, the regulators have a very huge role and also responsibility. Something happens tomorrow, they will be held accountable. So we need to understand the pressure that the regulator is also in. It's not that they're blocking it for a reason. They just want to be risk averse, and more so with the vaccine, because it's given to healthy people. Unlike therapeutics where people are being administered whatever therapeutic agent under hospital bed. A vaccine is given to healthy people and they have to be safe all the time. And that burden of risk of approving something without knowing is big. And unless we, from a developer, provide them sufficient evidence that and address all the fears that they may have, I don't see a reason why they will stop you. That kind of risk aversion will also be there even if you go to FDA. They will be risk averse.
So,
Absolutely.
Ketki, let me elaborate on that. It is not only the regulators in India, but worldwide, as you were mentioning. Any innovative product or technology, so there is delay, and more so in India. And the mRNA platform technology was available for many decades, many years, but thanks to COVID, it came out and it was approved. And for example, Indian Immunologicals, in association with the Indian Institute of Science, came up with the DNA vaccine for rabies. Almost 15, 20 years back, Dr. Padmanabhan himself was involved, but the regulatory authorities never gave the approval, despite of submission of all kind of apprehensions, answering all those also could not. So anything innovative means, so our regulatory authorities are not geared up. If it is approved elsewhere, then a DNA vaccine was approved immediately in India also. But otherwise, we would have been the first forerunners for DNA vaccines almost more than a decade. So at least now, with that experience, our regulatory authorities are geared up. Obviously, you are not the person to answer, but I think this is one of the challenges that Indian manufacturers will be facing for innovative vaccines.
Right, so we have one more question. This is basically asking how strong is our process development in terms of patent filing? Dr. Rao, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I think it's obvious, right? I mean, processes, you have to have a very clear process. For the patenting is an issue where they look at 3 criteria. So those 3 criteria are so obvious. Non-obvious, this is the obvious one, and novelty and utility. If you are meeting all these requirements, I think, and also you always want to run it by an expert to make sure that there is no overlapping and you're not stepping on somebody's foot. If you make sure of that, I think I don't know whether I'm answering your question, but I thought is the way to go.
Yes,
Dr.
Rajan has something to say.
Actually, I'm also confused, Dr. Rao.
Yeah.
What is the question? Is it asking whether we have a process development, or it's asking development? Is there a process for filing patent? There's obviously a process for filing patent.
Yeah,
Because
I think it reads more how strong is our process in terms of filing patents.
Yeah. So because usually process development refers to manufacturing or developing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is a well-defined machinery that takes in and evaluates patent application and files it, and there are quite certified people who do that within government setup as well as outside.
Right. I don't see any more questions coming in. So that would bring us towards the end of the session. I'd like to thank all of you, Dr. Rajan, Dr. Rao, Mr. Neti, who had to leave for another meeting, Professor Redanna for organizing this event, and all the colleagues at FABA and FABA Academy for this wonderful event and the very insightful discussion that we had post that. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening and see you again for another event.
Yeah, I would say that
Dr. Ketki, I think let us hear the concluding remarks from Dr. Uday Saxena.
Before that, I just
Yes, sir.
wanted to just say thanks to Rajan. I think that perspective of the vaccine industry is quite insightful. Thank you for that, Rajan.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Uday, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ketki. And I followed most of the discussion, and I must say it was very enlightening to be able to listen to what each of the, I mean, Madhu is somebody who is a good friend, and the other two are people who have heard of that I don't know them. So it's very nice meeting them over here. I think you guys brilliantly covered all the points that you had to. If I am allowed, Ketki, I'm going to give you my 2 cents worth of, I think, where this is going to go, how it's going to play out. I think
Absolutely,
whether it
sir.
is India or the US, the ultimate driver of innovation and risky investment is always the market. If there is a market and if there is money to be made, the people, the pharma industry will invest into that. But just for the heck of saying we are doing some exciting research, nobody, even the Mercs don't do that. So the 2 points I think is India has brilliantly moved on from identifying the opportunities that match up with the risk and talent that they have. We started with APIs. As you know, Dr. Reddy was one of the very first one. We migrated to a slightly higher risk profile in generics, and then a little more higher in biosimilars. And now as the unmet need folded for vaccines, India was right there and jumped into it. So I think Indian pharma is right on the money. They are extremely careful. The owners know exactly what they're doing, unlike what I used to think when I was not part of Indian pharma. I have been a large part of Indian pharma too. So I think the Indian pharma has done brilliantly. And I think it'll continue to move at its own pace where it sees the unmet need. And that's not different than the US. If you look at Merck or a Pfizer, they don't do something, just only the first company will do it, like the first in class. Statins is a very great example. Merck started the first statin. 8 other statins were launched by other companies. Why? Because Merck showed that there is a market. If Merck's drug had failed there, nobody else, however exciting the science, would have jumped into it. So it's very true. At the end of the day, the innovation and risk funding is all about what the market dictates. It's not what about academia want. It's really not about what the government wants either. It's what they think is going to make money for them. Vaccine is one thing. And as I said, the herd mentality exists not just here, it exists in US. If you look at one class of successful, what they call blockbuster drug, right? There'll be 7 or 8 of them. Why? Because large pharma also recognizes that this is a safe path to take. It's a proven track. Merck has made money. I think if we do slightly better than what they've done, we'll make money. So the important message I really think is we really shouldn't worry about, why is Indian pharma not taking the risk, or why are they not tapping into the Indian talent in University of Hyderabad. It's all down to the unmet market need. They have to respond to a shareholder. There's something called fiduciary responsibility, as you know. So just because, Dr. Reddy he could not take all the money and put it on drug discovery, right? Because his shareholders will then really take him to task. And that is going to happen. That will continue to happen in India. None of us can force Indian pharma to resort to high risk, high exciting research just because we think that's where it should be going. And it's a classic. It's the same true for US, worse for Europe, actually. Europe is neither India nor US. They still don't know what European pharma is all about, except Novartis and Sanofi maybe. So I think we should really be looking forward to the continuous risk calibration and premeditated movement the Indian companies have been making towards innovation. I think that's very important. India is still not a developed country. I don't think we are fooling anybody with that. So as the country becomes more developed, and as the return on investment in India, right now, Indian return on investment is purely on volume basis, right? The best we can do is try and sell something in the US. So all Indian companies are going to look at what does US need today that they don't have. And these are things like API, generics, biosimilars. So the time will come. It may not be in next 5 years, the next 10 years, but believe me, Indian pharma companies know what they're doing, and they will get the job done, as has been brilliantly presented and talked about the vaccine. I really think Indian pharma was outstanding in their ability to commercialize the opportunity of vaccine. Nobody else could have done it as good as we have, even the Pfizers and the Mercks. Actually, a lot of the large companies in US don't have vaccines, as you know, for COVID. There's only a couple. We have a lot more companies who are investing in vaccines. So we understood what the benefits are and that we have the capability to take the risk. So I'm a strong believer that Indian pharma is doing exactly what they need to be doing. And we don't need to kind of jump on them and say, how come you're not a Merck or a Pfizer, right? It's like asking Bollywood to be Hollywood. That's not going to happen. The cultures and the market demands of the two businesses are different. And really enjoyed the discussion the speakers had today. And thank you very much. It was great insight and learning for me as well. So Professor Redana, thank you very much. I hope I closed it off as you would have wanted me to.
No, I think that's a wonderful message. Market drives the industry to the product, innovative products. Yeah, good. Ketki, it is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Saxena, for this concluding remarks, which was mostly a message of hope. It nicely summarizes this entire discussion. With this, I would like to close this session. I again thank everyone for their participation and for taking the time out to be a part of this wonderful webinar, and look forward to interacting with all of you in the future as well. Have a nice evening.
You've been a wonderful host, Kate.
Thank you so much.
You have done a wonderful job, Ketki.
Yep.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Yeah.
Have a good day.
Rajan.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.